And our next activity practices a very important skill. You got to be able to read and watch stories and think about how they're similar or different to other stories. So we're going to compare and contrast right now. Consider the plot and characters from the ravine and compare them to the jumping tree. List four similarities and four differences between the stories. So, first thing is that this is a list, so it can just be bullet points. You see one bullet point under each column for me, and you can steal my answer. So, you really only have to come up with three. So, the first similarity that I came up with as an example to you guys is peer pressure. Sometimes the pressure was very clear and kids were even screaming and taunting each other. Sometimes the peer pressure was something that was in our character's head. Regardless, their peers or friends or people that were similar age to them, they had an effect on the individual, whether it was Vinny or Ray, our protagonist of the jumping tree, in what they wanted to do. They had to consider what their peers thought and what their peers were going to do. So both stories featured peer pressure, and that really affected our protagonists. An interesting difference: the jumping tree lacked something in its setting that the ravine had. The jumping tree didn't have any characters who had recently died from the dangerous activity the character was participating in. This definitely had a major effect on the setting. It's mentioned pretty early on in the ravine that the boy that jumped a couple weeks ago passed away from the activity that Vinny was doing. That is not in the jumping tree. And think about the effect that that has on the story. We don't have a clear cut fear for hanging off that branch and swinging and jumping down. Now, our protagonist, ends up getting hurt. He breaks his wrist from this, but it isn't like the story begins with someone saying, "Man, this tree is so dangerous. 2 weeks ago, someone got hurt jumping off of this." Had that been the case, or worse, had someone fallen and died there, it really would have affected the jumping tree. Do you think Ray would have been cracking as many jokes if someone had passed away there a couple weeks ago? It's interesting to think about how one tiny detail can affect the setting. Alrighty, so we have one similarity for free, one difference for free. You got to come up with three more for each column.